why we created the Club 720 platform, and that is you need real-time data, but you also need to deliver the resources that help those buyers and renters to show up and get past that capital access slump. We have a large majority that are minorities.
Is that by design or default?
It means we're hitting our goals, because if you don't aim at that population, women and minorities, you'll never hit it.
Best housing advice you've
You
received?
can become an owner, do it, and you can become an owner.
Worst advice, though. We have to hear the worst advice.
The worst advice?
Worst housing advice.
Worst housing advice, I would say, is
You're listening to the NEI Pioneer Podcast, where we showcase and share the authentic stories of Northeast Indiana. Make sure to subscribe to us if you're watching us on YouTube, or follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. In today's episode, we sat down with someone who is known as Northeast Indiana's housing queen, Heather Presley-Cowen. Heather is the Chief Executive Officer of Club 720, which is a housing resource center located here in Northeast Indiana. Housing is such a hot button topic right now, and so sitting down with a dedicated and passionate professional in the industry was so insightful. You'll quickly pick up on why she has been given the title of the housing queen. If you're curious about Club 720 or the work that Heather and her team are doing, be sure to stick around for this episode. So without any further ado, let's jump into the episode.
Hello and welcome back, or welcome to the NEI Pioneer Podcast. I'm Jonathan Sackett, head of MarCom at NEI, and today my partner in crime is...
Jacob Ihrie, Director of Regional Initiatives.
Great partner. And we have a guest of all guests. Today we've got my good friend and longtime partner, Heather Presley-Cowen.
good afternoon.
Otherwise known as the queen of all things housing in Northeast Indiana, and maybe more,
Wow.
right?
I would say I know finance.
She's very modest. We're gonna draw it out of her today, though. So Heather, you know that people do call you the housing queen, right? Do you know that?
I'm learning that. I certainly don't deserve that title, but I'll consider it an honor.
I didn't.
Like, a thing with royalty is you don't really, earn your titles.
Yeah, it's not earned, it's given. Well, because when you came in and when you first came into the building, I didn't know if you saw my notes over there that it said housing queen.
No, I did
okay,
not
I thought
see that.
I saw you look down and give me a funny look, and I thought, oh, okay, she's on to me. So
I would have been much more nervous.
No, nothing to be nervous about. So, listen, would you mind telling us how you got into housing to begin with?
You know, I worked for the city of Fort Wayne for almost 25 years. And
I think you started at 19?
5. I was actually about 5 when I started.
You're 5.
Based on my age now.
Yes, for sure. That facial cream is doing wonders.
Thank you. Yes, I started with the city before I graduated college. I actually started in city utilities, so that tells you something. But I wanted to work in community development, and I actually have the distinguished honor of having Mayor Graham Richard, one of the 3 mayors that I worked for, named a day after me because I had held more jobs in community development than any other person. And so I really did. I loved every aspect of it. But where I landed was working with federal funds and learning housing.
And you are so passionate about it. Because we were joking about it in the pre-production meeting. I said, I've known her for 2 years now, and you were one of the first people that we did the video profile on.
That's right.
And we all took a look at that video again just to brush up on you for the show. I got to tell you, it's the one thing that I brought up is I said, I can't get away from talking about housing with her because you always pull the conversation back in. The passion that you have for it, where does that passion come from?
I love to be housed. I'm just kidding.
I like a roof over my head.
I love a roof over my head. You know what? I think I grew up in a very small town in Woodburn, Indiana, in what people would think was not housing in a mobile home, and had the very best life I could have ever had. I'll be honest. I had amazing parents and lived a great life. But as I got older, I learned that home ownership helps people to build wealth, which can really change future generations. And I just got really excited about it. And then seeing how housing affects neighborhoods and how neighborhoods affect people, I think that it's all very fascinating, and I'm a lifelong learner. So I don't know everything about housing, but I definitely am interested in it.
Yeah.
Well, I've known Heather about the same amount of time, but I think I've known a couple iterations of you, because right now you are the president of Club 720, but previously it was the Housing Resource Hub.
Yeah.
And I think you really do a great job of demonstrating why that brand change happened, and I'd really love to hear about that.
Well, thank you. So when I worked for the city, I was interested in housing beyond just what we were doing in Fort Wayne. And so I started doing some work in policy, writing policies, training policies for the state. And as I went through that iteration of myself, I launched a business about 5 to 6 years before I left the city that was focused on helping small and rural communities. Mm-hmm. So when I delved into that, what was interesting was I found that places like Woodburn are amazing places to live, but those communities didn't necessarily get the attention that a place like Fort Wayne had. So I was able to sort of set my eyes on it and see what was going on there. And what I realized was there are very similar issues. So I launched this business, but not before I had a conversation with Graham Richard, once again, one of my favorite mentors, who said, have you talked to Ryan Chasey at High Performance Government Network? They are doing some work in communities, and maybe there's a way to work together. So that was 2010. We started working together. Flash forward to 2020. I have now left the city, and I'm launching a two-headed brain, not monster, that's focused on housing production and home buyer assistance. And Ryan and I collaborated for many years helping local governments, but my goal was always to launch a national platform to develop housing and to build home buyer pipelines. And that's what Club 720 is all about.
Well, I've spent a lot of time with you, probably more than you'd like. But
we all feel that way. It's okay.
No, it's fine. I know exactly who I am. But I just think for Jonathan here, if you could just explain that pipeline, because I think that's really a super innovative piece that you've been developing.
Thanks.
You don't thank me every time.
Sheesh.
I say mostly nice things about you.
Thinking it's cool, but well, so when I was at the city, we would put money out on the street, and here we are in the city county building, and as soon as the mayor said one word about down payment assistance or we have home renovation programs, we would literally see hundreds of people show up in our lobby. One year we thought, we don't want them coming into the lobby. We don't want to create that barrier. Let's open a phone line. They shut down our phone line because we had so many people calling in. And so I kind of got this idea, we focused on a tool called the Analysis of Impediments to Fair Housing Choice. And that said that one of the biggest barriers to housing for our community and in many communities was access to capital. So you think about, we would announce this program and droves of people would show up saying, I need help. And access to capital was the problem. And again, flash forward to some of my consulting work I was doing with Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority. I was helping nonprofits who were trying to understand how to help people access assets. Same thing all over again. So what was the common denominator? Access to capital, for what I learned, was they didn't know about it, and if they knew about it, they couldn't get their hands on it. And if they could get their hands on it, they still needed a Sherpa, a guide, somebody to hold their hand through it. And that's where I got super excited, because that means we can actually kind of really help people, not just put money in people's hands.
Well, okay, when you say that, do you think that the problem is structurally that when all you have is a hammer, right? Is that what the deal is? If you're going to find a resource or to get help or assistance in some capacity, that you're talking to these people and they're just cookie cuttering it. Is that what the challenge is?
I think, first of all, governments, the idea that governments and public-private partnerships, that's important. But what I found was it became a hammer, and everything then becomes a nail, because maybe government didn't know how to talk to banks about how to blend resources together. And then buyers are afraid of going to banks because, if you're like me, my mom said, go to a mortgage company, banks will tell you no. So there's a mindset issue, there's access issues from public-private partnerships, there's just a general lack of access to money. And so how do we put all of that into one platform and allow that single mom with 2 kids to take a homebuyer education course after she puts the kids to bed so she can accomplish her dream?
Wow. And then, so we talked about this a long time ago when I first met you. What was it like going from a government position that you were there for so long to private? Because, and it's a taboo question, because I guess I'm asking, do you feel like you were running to a surface, or do you feel like you were running from something?
Both.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I would say that having worked for government for as long as I did, for 3 different administrations, everything...
Because I think you were the youngest person in that position, weren't you?
Yeah, I was like 27, I think, when I was promoted, and had, I ended up with a master's in management, but without 1 ounce of real tangible management experience. So you step into a management role as a 27-year-old with people who are old enough to be your parents working for you, and all of a sudden you learn really quickly about...
Backlash?
Maybe just stuff I brought on myself, You don't know how to interact with people in a way that's effective when you're just trying to learn your job. Unfortunately, you find out the hard way how to interact with people in some ways, but what I learned most of all was grace and mercy are so critical in any relationship, but certainly when I left the city, what I was most proud of was I had a team of people who knew I wanted to hear problems first and that I'd roll up my sleeves and get involved and help them. And believe me, in compliance, you get plenty of that. But what I was running to, so I was really kind of happy to leave the day-to-day 9 to 5, 10 to 5, no, actually, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., never leave your job, to go and be more present for my family and to work on my own terms. And so owning a business was all of that for me. I owned a business before and after leaving the city, though. So my bridge to being able to do life on my own terms was really my business.
And I think that that's, pretty invaluable experience when you're working with governments, is being mired in the...
You know how this goes.
I do.
It does. I would imagine that there would have been a paradigm mind shift, that if you're going from government to private sector, were you able to leverage what you brought with you from government, or? Oh,
absolutely. I would say one of the people that I most admire to this day and also appreciate is Jacob Sipe at IHCDA. We kind of both grew up in government, he in state, me in local. But what I really appreciated was, as a housing expert, he really valued what I had to say and what I was doing, and he was always very supportive of that. So both while I was at the city doing business with Indiana Housing to a lesser extent, but certainly when I launched my business, some of my first contracts were with Indiana Housing. So I look at Jake and how innovative he is as a person, but also the policies that he puts forth, that I tend to really appreciate how he goes about that. But he actually gave me business that allowed me to see the vision fully, that this is what life could be like if you were out just helping all communities the way you're helping Fort Wayne right now.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because if you take a look at the landscape, and especially because we're in an election year, okay, everybody's talking about housing. Yeah. Everybody's talking about housing. And I may be off on the statistics here, but we are continuously rated top 5 in the country for housing. Affordability, Gen Z. Why do you think that is?
Because people value cheap housing, and that was really the case for a very long time. And I'm being flippant saying that.
Yeah.
Those values, housing being affordable, is really to whom is always my question. So,
well, affordable housing is the term has taken on its own life. So when you think of affordable housing, you're probably not thinking of good housing.
And that's the point, is when you look at our median values based on the data that's about a year old, it's way lower than what it really is. I mean, you go out and try to buy a house in this market, and people are like, oh, you can buy a house for $125,000. It's like, nah, I'm not seeing many of those anymore. And those are getting snapped up oftentimes by private sector, turning them into rentals, which become unaffordable. So when we say, why are we one of the most affordable housing locations in the nation, it's a similar situation and dissimilar at the same time. In the Midwest, we have housing that costs less than other places, But if people can't afford it, is it really affordable? Right. So it might be affordable for someone moving out of California to move here. That's great. But the lack of housing causes a real problem in our communities. And so what we spend a lot of time doing, community leaders, is understanding what that dynamic looks like and how do we free up that, let's say, $175,000 housing that's sitting on the street, not $125,000. And then when you look at where our rents have gone, you really, home ownership is a very viable solution if you have, the wherewithal to manage, a house.
And I guess with that, in working with all these government units, and we see it all over, is what are the misconceptions that you find that disconnect between what the market actually can bear and what your local government partners kind of can stomach?
Well, I talk a lot about swagger, and some mayors like that, and others assign other, thoughts to what that means. But what it means to me is that you have the intestinal fortitude to actually look at what the situation is and then delve into how you can fix it. And so I talk about 3 data errors. The first data error is a lot of communities order a study. And a study, I say, looks back. It says, okay, what was going on last year? It says, hey, you're shrinking and therefore you're dying. And in reality, it's usually due to deaths, but we're not really looking forward. It's like looking at the rearview mirror and trying to figure out where to go next. And so that's a big one. They get the wrong specs on their housing study. Second one is appraisal gap. That's a big one. Once we've figured out that most communities do have market potential, they just need to build the stock that today's buyers and renters want. We end up with an appraisal gap, which means, again, old data. The banks are using an existing stock to measure the new construction, and so we can't meet it. And the last one is why we created the Club 720 platform, and that is you need real-time data, but you also need to deliver the resources that help those buyers and renters to show up, find the housing, and get past that capital access slump.
Okay, Club 720. Why didn't somebody else think of this? I mean, it seems like, because
They
I know
probably did. I just wrote it down. and
that's half the battle, isn't it?
Right,
But I mean, because I remember, and I don't know what you can or can't talk about with this, but I know that there was a mortgage lender that I think damn near 100% of the people that you gave them qualified for a loan.
Well, that
whole backstory.
Really, what we found was when you go out and you build a trust bridge between people and the resources, transparency becomes a big deal. And yeah, we basically were, when I left the city, I had been researching a type of program that was available to local governments. I was very excited about it. And when I left, that group came back to me and said, hey, can you help us launch Indiana? Not just Fort Wayne, but can you help us finish Fort Wayne and launch Indiana? And that's what we did. But in 1 quarter, we launched in Marion County, and Marion County just put out a press release. It was led by the housing agency, and we got in the 4th largest media outlet. So we got some news around Marion County, and within a quarter, we had 1,000 people come onto the platform. It was crazy, 1,000 people. But what we quickly realized was, and at the time Club 720 existed, but we weren't using it for that program. And what we learned was it was just too much. There was no direct path for that buyer who came in and said, hey, I want to learn more about this program and can I get pre-approved? And the lenders who were sitting on the other side waiting to serve them, they got inundated with buyers, and a lot of those buyers didn't get served. And I was livid. It was just such an injustice in my mind that you have all these people reaching out saying, hey, I heard about this program, but never got access. So we started then using Club 720 as a platform to onboard them and serve them and make sure that they reach those goals. And that's where, one of the largest lenders in the nation said, hey, we want to be a part of your program.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable. So, okay, do you think the challenge is lack of awareness of resource? Is that where the problem is? Because I don't know what percentage of people that are applying, what their background is, what their ethnicity is. I don't know the things that are going to play into this whole ecosystem or non-ecosystem.
Yeah.
So if is it just a matter of getting the word out there and showing people there are resources that can help you get into your first home?
That's part of the equation, but we use alliteration and say awareness leads to access, which leads to affluence. And I think if you're going to get from access to affluence, you've actually got to, there's a lot of hand-holding that needs to be done. Mindset becomes the number one. So I'm aware of this program, but do I have the guts to get on there and actually say, I'm going to do it? Right? So there's a group of people who don't even get on the platform for that reason. But what we've found is we're in Cook County, Illinois, and in Indiana right now, and getting ready to expand nationally. And what we know is we are attractive. We have 54% of our members, our Club 720 members that come onto the platform, are women. And we have a large majority that are minorities. And so in Cook County, it looks like...
Is that by design or default?
It means we're hitting our goals, because if you don't aim at that population, women and minorities, you'll never hit it. So we're really proud of that. But that also means we're serving a lot of men and a lot of non-minorities as well, because it's just over half and about, 2/3 minorities. And so, I look at Cook County, Illinois, and these are college professors. These are hospital staff. These are people who have the median credit score there is 711. So we're talking about maybe first generation buyers in some cases, but I look at those programs and I think, okay, a Cook County program that has that level of interest, I then want to see them close. And so we have that line of sight.
My home's in Cook County.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, see? And I'm guessing your neighborhood's a hot spot, but it maybe doesn't have enough housing.
Yeah, what you get in that, because I'm in Old Town, which is Old Town Chicago, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So what you get there is knockdowns.
Yes.
So if, and it's almost disheartening, because I know that there was one guy on my block, that house had been in his family for 40, 50 years, something crazy. And, I keep moving away. I was living in New York. I moved back to Chicago, and the house was gone. Yeah. And somebody bought it off. He lived there for, I think it was like 3 generations that owned that house. And then he had all of his relatives living there and such. And they knocked it down, and they built this 4-story house where this nice little house once was. But there's no room. No. I mean, literally, I can reach out my window and touch the next house over.
And he does all the time.
And I do that a lot. That's why I have new neighbors there frequently.
It's a litmus test. But I want to circle back with the whole concept of the platform and kind of digitizing that. So do you get any interface with people on the platform? Do you get to have those like fuzzy moments where you get to see someone close on their house, and which one's your favorite?
Oh, I would say yes, we do get those. Actually, our best we have a clubhouse. It's it's a closed Facebook group, and someone posted, "Hey, Club 720, I got my cleared to close. Thank you." And that's pinned to this moment because that's what we're looking for. But yeah, we are high touch, interestingly, as much as we're so high tech. We have probably 5 to 7 different ways of communicating through that platform. And then all of our partners that come on, all the lenders, are required to follow a code of conduct. What we learned was when Club 720 talks to you, whether it's a coach or a lender or a realtor, people respond. But if that lender decides to take them off platform and communicate with them through their own channels, they clam up. And so it's building trust, it's keeping records, it's tracking what's going on, and that buyer gets advocated for the entire time.
Well, how do you think you were able to warm up the technology then? Because
that's a good question.
Yeah, because I mean, I think, listen, I've been doing this a while, so I mean, if you take a look at the work that me and my teams have done over the years, it's a lot of it is warming up technology. We had IBM and Microsoft; those are the ones I don't talk about that much. But when we were doing that stuff, people anticipate cold and they try to bypass you to get around it to a call center where they can actually speak to a human being.
We get that a lot.
Yeah, humanizing the technology is the challenge, because it becomes, you're either giving somebody brand or you're giving them resource, or you're giving them both. Or neither. And it seems like, I know Club 720 fairly well, so it seems like you guys are doing both very well. Was that trial and error, or how were you able to get it so that you built trust? You built trust on an app.
Yeah.
That's not easy.
Well, I would say, as you say that, I guess it's a very good question. I think it's twofold. One, we've always described her as her. She's your non-judgmental best friend, although we had never have had the likes of a Jonathan Sackett helping us with our positioning. And
I'm Jonathan Sackett.
Yeah, the Jonathan Sackett.
Yeah.
We don't have a hump day. But
Not yet.
But that being said, I think what we did was we worked through, there's an irony here.
Okay.
Having worked for government, who trusts the government? I don't know. I've heard all kinds of people for years rib me for having worked in government. But we work in partnership, hand in hand with governments. And so when a local
So you're
government...
kind of a buffer.
We are. We actually become, no one has a 16-member staff that's working solely on this down payment assistance program. And governments, basically, we engage with them in that way. We become an adjunct. So when they put out information about their program and say, get on Club 720, people trust that. But it also is a high level of responsibility on our part, because people will say, can I just talk to a human? And our coaches are like, I am a human.
Yeah.
That's
and sign of the times.
They just don't know. They really think they're getting, canned messages when it's like, no, this is a real person. And one of our coaches said yesterday, I don't feel bad about misspelling a word in our chat because they know that I am human. But we're human digital, and it is in that order.
Hi, everyone. We want to take a quick moment to shout out our podcast sponsors. Now, first, you might be wondering who I am, so let me introduce myself. I am Hannah Hannigan, and normally I'm behind the camera as the videographer, but today I wanted to be in front of the camera to shout out the people who made this podcast possible. Barrett McNagny and Sweetwater Sound are the two sponsors of our podcast, and they're both located in Northeast Indiana. If you don't already know who they are, let me introduce them to you. We're going to start with Barrett McNagny. As Fort Wayne has grown, the Barrett Law Firm has grown with it. Founded in 1876, Barrett McNagny is one of the oldest law partnerships in Indiana, and it's among one of the largest just in Northeast Indiana. They have the breadth of experience across a wide range of practice areas to provide you trusted legal counsel where and when you need it. And Sweetwater is actually the one we were able to purchase most of our audio and video gear from to make this podcast. So if you like how this podcast sounds or how it looks, be sure to check them out. Sweetwater, the nation's largest, and I would also add friendliest destination for music gear, is also your one-stop shop for all things podcasting. From audio interfaces, recording software, mixers, microphones, cameras, and lighting, Sweetwater has everything to get your podcast up and running. Enjoy personalized gear advice from their dedicated team of sales engineers, as well as free technical support to get your podcast connected and up and running. Really, what's not to love about that? So whether you already have a following or you're still chasing the next big thing, Sweetwater is going to be the ones to help you create a podcast that everyone will be talking about. So if you're interested in either of these companies, be sure to check out the links in our description. Now, let's get back to the podcast.
So I was in our main conference room the first time I saw you present. Now, you and I had known each other already. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And you were up there, and there was a subdivision that you guys were building out, and you were giving this whole presentation on it. And that's when I first thought to ask you, and I haven't had the chance. I don't know if you focus on rural or if that's by default, that it just ends up being that. How big was that subdivision that you guys were working on?
Wabash is Legacy Heights was 44 units.
Yeah.
Walkable to downtown. It is the exact same version. It's interesting you asked that question, and it's the same on Club 720. If you don't aim at rural, no one will ever hit it.
Mm-hmm.
So again, yes, we're working in Cook County, Illinois. Chicago's big.
I can't see. I don't picture you guys in Cook County. Cook County is Cook County. I
But
mean,
Cook
that's
County, you talk about South Cook, they really, really need more housing options there. We've got focus areas there as well.
And I think that there's so much parity that we don't talk about. Like, we always talk about the rural-urban divide, but we don't talk about the rural-urban similarities.
Ooh, good stuff.
And and Heather knows me well enough to know that this has become the Jake show for the next 5 minutes. I'm just kidding.
I love it.
But
Go there.
But there is this huge disparity of being willing to engage with a rural community or in any underserved community gives you a lot of trust right off the bat. And like I don't know, I've seen Heather work, and I think you do a great job of bridging that gap, because there's a huge capacity issue, and I can't imagine them being that dissimilar.
No, I think it's a matter of accessibility that I find rural communities have an edge because they are so accessible. So you think about calling local leadership together, whether they agree or disagree on things. I have seen amazing groups of people get together and just get it done. And they're inspired and they're ready to go and they're going to make it happen. And I think that is the secret sauce, regardless of size. It is a leader or group of leaders who've decided this is what we're going to do, and they just make it happen.
You know, it's so strange because, you know, I've made it no secret. I did not come from an economic development background by a long shot. But I learned something every day. And I think one of the main things that surprised me was when I would see local government or local constituents not allowing for a subdivision to be built. And they would say things like, because, you know, the ecosystem, well, no, we can't do that because we're not going to have the downtown stores. And then we can't do that because we're not going to have we don't have the jobs for these people, or we're going to be pilfering from the next community over or whatever. I mean, how can you possibly break through that to shake the truth into somebody if they're saying, well, nah, it's because you know what the answer sounds like to me, being a little bit of an outsider? It sounds like it's too hard.
Well, everybody fears the unknown.
Yeah.
You know, that person that lives beside you in Chicago worries that you're going to reach out and touch them. And
you've been
that's
talking
a
to
valid
Ken?
Concern. But that, you know, I
My
think,
neighbors will be so happy they made the podcast.
well, you know, but what I see is you know, when the local community has a voice, that's empowerment, right? They are empowered. In housing, though, when what we found is roughly half of your market potential isn't living here yet, how do you empower them? And so what we know is, whether it's Northeast Indiana, I would feel comfortable saying any county in Indiana has a similar layout. Half of the folks who are looking for housing, wanting to move around, live in the county. About a third more are living outside of that county on the edges, and then about 20% of our market potential is coming from out of state. So empowering a neighborhood is important, but empowering those buyers, those prospective buyers who every time their lease comes up, they're looking for an apartment in that community, or every time they're thinking, I'm going to make this move to home ownership, they're searching up Zillow and find nothing. Those are the folks that all should be empowered. How do you balance that? That's what I think elected officials, especially, they're tasked with, is how do we balance that? How do we make sure the neighborhood, that we're doing good things for the neighborhood, and that these people, we figure out, okay, they're millennials, I can tell you that. And yeah, and they are the most diverse generation yet, right?
You just made him very happy. That's good.
And
we like to keep Jake happy around here. Because sad Jake sucks. There, I said it.
Hot take.
We don't get out much. We sit in this room. This is where we live.
Well, and one thing that you've taught me, because I worked with you in a past life, is how we talk about, to kind of go back to what Jonathan said earlier about, you know, affordable housing becoming like this 4-letter word, and it starts all these, you know, NIMBYs to kind of, you know, fire up, is understanding one of the things that your organization does that so many nonprofits avoid doing is actually diving in and saying we will build market rate housing, because What's the other A word that we use now?
What?
Attainable.
Attainable.
Come on. You
I'm
taught me
sorry.
that, Heather.
Yes,
Come
I'm sorry.
on.
I totally missed that one.
So
You gave me a
I laid it
softball
up.
and
I laid it back up for you.
You did.
I got you.
Alley-oop.
Yes. And that is, I think, to your point, because I was like, okay, you're right. So when we look at market rate housing, what we all think is market rate, like if I went around this room.
Well, how's that calculated, right?
Right.
Yeah.
What is market rate? Most buyers that are in the big A affordable have to earn at 80% of area median income or less.
Say that again.
80% of area median income or less. So that means you take whatever that median income is in the community and you multiply it by 0.8, and everybody in that realm is going to get funded. If it's 64,000, it's 48, whatever. But the point being, when we start cutting off and we create neighborhoods around incomes, we basically get rid of what you know best, Jacob, which is that the best communities are designed with houses of all sizes. And affordability really is based on housing size, right? So if I live in a smaller unit in a bungalow in West Central in Fort Wayne, now that place is not as affordable as it used to be by a stretch. But the point being,
Well, you know where I live here.
yeah, you're in
That's
really
and they keep
expensive.
upping the rent too.
Yeah, and you just keep paying it.
And I just keep paying
some
it.
other people have to move. And then I think about millennials and Gen Z, our workforce. It needs to be attainable to them if we're going to have functioning eateries in downtown.
Yeah.
If I've got to drive a distance to get here, I'm probably just not going to work there.
Yeah, that's right.
And so when we think about affordable, we talk about big A and little a affordable. Is it attainable housing is little a. It is what's affordable to you might be different than what's affordable to me. But when we talk about housing, we're going to talk about all of it.
Yeah.
And are we trying to get the most wealthy people to be able to buy a house there? No, a nonprofit is not focused on that. But what we are focused on is workforce attainable, which means we need to make sure that we're serving a broader range and getting into the moderate income and middle income households.
Well, because I don't know if you made this up or me, so I'll just give myself credit for this one. Is the cheapest housing, the most affordable housing, is already built.
Yep.
And what all these communities are missing is that housing mobility that you're making, the ability to move
up, move down, yes. And, that's the interesting thing is when you look at the current makeup of most communities, it's got the largest size group is going to be the baby boomer generation. It's going to be empty nesters and retirees. But if you look at where those communities are headed, the largest group that they're going to probably become are millennials. The oldest millennials now are in their early 40s. They're buying houses and they are wanting to own a home. And so when we think about what they're able to afford, it might be more than 80% of area median income. Is it wrong to serve them? Do they have any less need? No. Why can they not come up with a down payment? Because they have college debt. So when you look at these are similar problems on the surface, but when you delve down a little bit deeper, you understand it's mobility. It's a family that wants to move up, but that's growing and can't find it. If we're going to get that stock in that community, we're going to have to build housing that costs more than what's there, just by virtue of being new construction. So we're now innovating on finding partners and methods of construction that are better, faster, and cheaper, because we need housing fast. We need the best housing stock possible. But are there ways the governments can get involved in housing in a way that we actually can buy housing at a lower cost? Kind of like fuel hedging.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's thought of that yet, Heather. So don't know if you want to.
Can I take that idea? Is that my idea now? Just because you said that and you're talking about innovation, and because my partner here, Jake, just gave you a very big compliment, I want to give you one too, and then I'm going to ask you a question. But I've always said it's passion, patience, persistence, and perseverance. That's what it. Well, because when you're in school for marketing, they teach you the 5 Ps of the marketing mix. I heard it's 4 now, but whatever. But what you have brought to me that I've seen in you is this huge sense of purpose. I've never seen anybody with such passion around their work as you. Absolutely, hands down. And it was funny because in the pre-production meeting when we were talking about you, behind your back to your face, I said, you know what, Heather, Heather can talk all day. We don't even have to. Here's the questions. You can just go. I think you are so passionate about your purpose and your role in doing this that it's infectious. It is. I could listen to you speak all day.
Oh, man.
So there you go. No, I'm not going to compliment you anymore. Let's get into the hard hitting.
Just for our listeners, you actually can come here, Heather, speak September 11th, the week after this episode will be dropping.
That's right.
We'll be holding the Regional Housing Symposium. We'll link to that site, I'm sure, on the episode. I am looking at Bryce to make sure that that is accurate.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we've got the URL in there for you. And I think we've got a pretty good attendance so far, and we
do. Shout out to your team for that, and obviously shout out to Heather and all the partners.
You're the
in
draw.
that, and
We're just the creative behind the draw, I think. But you were talking about, and we'll make sure that we've got the link posted for you and everything. I wanted to talk to you about, you and I attended a meeting, I think it was probably a month or two ago, and it was a local company here in Fort Wayne, and what they do is they basically have this machine, it looks like a semi-truck, and it can print the components for 3D housing. Would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah. That
was one of the neatest things I've ever seen. And I felt like I was asking all these questions, and they were like,
great questions.
Dude, no, I don't know about that. I felt like they were telling me to go do my homework and come back.
No, what I loved about that meeting was, here we think we've unearthed something really cool, and we had.
Yeah.
And so the first thing is, got to get Jonathan, get the Northeast Indiana partnership there. This idea that housing needs to be constructed quickly and affordably at a very high quality, because we don't want to destroy neighborhoods. We can't destroy values. So as we're adding in new housing stock, how do we get it produced quicker? And so Pure Construction is a phenomenal partner. I've known Mo for a very long time. And if you know the owner of this company, he is very, very passionate about what he does, and that's construction.
And intensely intelligent about the subject. I was intimidated in a very positive way when he started talking about his product.
I saw that as the future, that we were witnessing the future, because, and I was asking questions about, well, what if a car plows into your house? Can you order those components? Yep.
Yes.
It's plug and play.
I know that he hosted Mayor Long and his building basically commissioner for a tour, and then went to and produced a wall and had two framers to put it together without instructions, and they did it flawlessly. And so the point of this being,
Wow.
I have a Six Sigma background, and so I'm like, better, faster, cheaper. Well, no, this is like, how do we really improve our processes?
It changes the game.
It is. And, the cool part of this is it is one of one in the nation. It is a technology that he's developed, but it's the way he's mapped things together that's the uniqueness. It's not like there's one component. So we're not like, set up for, being too dependent in this way. But we are testing this idea in Wabash at Legacy Heights and are partnering with Pure Construction as our lead partner. But what's really super exciting from the Club 720 perspective is this is not an entity that they're a vendor. That's how I see them. They are a vendor. They are a partner where we can bulk purchase housing, our governments can. And then Club 720's buyers have the opportunity to come on and give their feedback, and we can customize in real time.
It's unbelievable. And what did he say the timing was? Building 30 houses out in 30 days or something crazy.
Well, basically the way they're able to do this
it's an assembly line.
It's an assembly line. It is very much like that kind of Six Sigma way of doing things. So depending on how many units we need and have available, it's a balance, right? We've got construction and absorption. But in Legacy Heights, let's say they're going to build the first 6. Once they maybe they'll pour all the pads and they can frame at the same time, because the steel, ICC certified steel. So the building
instead of wood
folks are going to be okay. Yes.
Yeah.
And because we are controlling on price on this, we're able to bulk purchase that and get a better deal.
Wow. I mean, I just, it's funny because when you talk about housing in particular, everything is an ecosystem. Everything is. And there's a balance. And, one of the things that always surprised me was, we talked earlier a little bit about this. Okay, we're going to build out a subdivision. Now, what is the proximity to schools? What is the proximity to water? How much power can they get? We have these conversations here all the time. I just wonder, is there a potential downside to having a system of building homes, high quality homes, by the way? It's not like those old frames that they used to, right? Because I think one of the questions I asked, they were like, don't call it that, and whatever I was supposed to. Yeah.
Well, they're not doing the 3D printing that we might think about in terms of, pouring concrete. This is they can do they'll take a blueprint and turn it into a 3D model. So a buyer getting on Club 720 that doesn't even live here, let's say, like we had people coming from Texas, California, Florida, Indianapolis that were looking to live in Wabash when we originally launched their homebuyer program. Those buyers who can't come here and tour those houses can actually see them in a 3D model, right? But once they decide, yes, this is the blueprint that I want to build, if they were to build it that way, then that's where this company is able to take that, digitize those blueprints, and then produce all the materials in one fell swoop. And that machine is paced at people time, because if we wanted to go faster with that,
exactly.
it could. So when you say that, I mean, this is really a very simple idea, but it's one that's really relevant. Becoming too dependent on any one vendor is going to always be a concern for anyone. So our ability to understand how this fits into the picture, how to map it into the ecosystem in a way that's buffered, that's what we specialize in with the public-private partnerships, is de-risking on all sides. Government becomes an investor, private sector is an investor, and our nonprofit's an investor as well.
I mean, I wonder, you're talking about a major disruption for construction workers. Because I remember the one quote that he said, if you can turn a screw and pound a nail, you can build a house.
The one thing that you will not see with these houses, you'll not see bandsaws or saws, and you won't see any measuring tapes, because this product is designed as, kind of like an erector set. So, but custom builds, extremely high quality builds. So what's exciting to us is that we didn't have to skimp on quality at all. It's going to, obviously, insurance costs should be lower because it's steel frame construction. Steel doesn't burn, and drywall doesn't burn. So we're looking at a really high quality product, but then it's produced more quickly. If we're buying, obviously, we need to purchase many, and then most affordably, because we're able to bulk buy.
Well, and I think part of the things to highlight with that, when you say scary words like disruption, is that the need for housing is so great, not just in this region of the country. I think the Planning Journal just put out we're 14 million units behind nationwide. That this is just a piece in, and
yes.
You can speak firsthand. You've done market potential analysis, just looked at the housing future for 9 of the 11 counties in our region.
Yeah.
And, I think you can comfortably speak on the fact that everyone has big gaps and very few people can meet them right now.
Well, to your point, I think the last time we looked at the market potential for Northeast Indiana, just in the 10 counties outside of Allen alone, we needed 15,000 housing units. And when we looked up 5 years later, that was over a 5-year period we needed that. We had produced just 5,134 units. Thank you, Northeast Indiana Partnership. I think Mark put that together. And so, but, this is what happens when you measure your market potential and then you look up later to see what you did. And so without touching it, and we needed 36% rental, 64% home buyer units, we produced 94% home buyer units, 6% rental. What is a rental? What is rental when you have 20% of your market potential coming from out of state? It's where you land so you can figure out where you're going to plant your feet. And so knowing that we need more rental, especially in our rural communities, we're watching the rents in those areas skyrocket. But a great example was we were down in Adams County. and had a housing symposium where we're sharing the results. And you had so many decision makers just sitting there, just could not believe we've got $700 a month rents on the streets today, and you're telling us we need to move to $1,500 to $3,000 if we're going to meet our market potential. And I'm like, that's what the analysis says. And all of a sudden, a manager for one of the a factory down there stands up, who's a millennial, and says, I'm driving 2 hours a day from Sturgis, Michigan, 3 times a week.
Whoa.
And if you build a downtown apartment and charge me $1,500, I'd pay it all day long. But I'm not moving to Fort Wayne. And I was like, I didn't plant this guy. That's not uncommon to hear.
He's not my
that.
son.
No, exactly. Who's this guy? But to that, I mean,
Oddly fake mustache.
I think it was 2
Call
kids.
me mom
there was
later.
there was a trench coat and a hat involved. That's all I remember. Before we get into the rapid fire, which is the end of this, you're such a great person, and I could listen to you all day, and you know this, and I'm done kissing up to you now. But I'm really curious. Is there one aspect, component, story, whatever that if you think back on your career and the trajectory that you've been on, is there one thing that makes you really proud? Is there some really good advice that you got, or is there advice that you'd give to somebody else to pass on the torch? That's a big one.
That is a big one. Because my mother recently passed away, she's at my top of my mind. Thank you. At a very young age. But she would always be top of my mind. But there's something that she told me when I was a child that actually never left me. And I always say I was just dumb enough to believe it was you could do anything you put your mind to. And I think what she was telling me, because there will be people that'll say, no, don't tell people that. That's going to disappoint them later on. But the point being, I think she really knew a lot of the challenges that I would face in my life, and she really understood the importance of mindset. And that is probably the number one thing that, whether it's a buyer on Club 720 or it's a community leader, a business owner or educated professional who's now become an elected leader, I feel like my goal in every one of those scenarios is to help people know you can.
Yeah.
And when you set your mind to it, things start to change. It may not be exactly what you thought it was going to turn out to be. It's probably going to be better, but you got to believe it first.
Yeah. Great advice.
Thanks.
Heather, you're the best.
You are.
So, yeah, there's a lot of love in this room for you. And not just because you wore our primary color.
That's right.
It didn't hurt.
It didn't hurt. So let's just put it that way. Notice the hat. Okay, so we're going to get into rapid fire now. So if you were going to take somebody to dinner somewhere in Northeast Indiana, what would be your go-to place?
Oh, gosh. In Northeast Indiana, I would choose... I really love Baker Street.
Mm-hmm. I was just there on Sunday.
I mean, there's just something about it. And so I guess that'd be my pick. I love the barrel chairs inside the bar.
Yeah. Well, plus James won our Pioneer of the
And
Year
I love James.
James is a great guy.
He's awesome.
I've got issues with him.
Villages of Arneo. I just want to put that out there. Villages of Arneo. Did I say that enough?
Yes. James, are you watching?
All right, Coney Island hot dog or DeBran chocolates?
Oh, DeBran.
Oh, I'll be seeing Kathy tomorrow, and I will tell her that you said that.
Oh, yeah.
I'll see if I can get her to give you a gift.
We just couldn't be more different.
Best housing advice you've received and best advice you would give?
Buy now. Just don't wait. Just buy, because it's only going to be more expensive later. And it would be the same advice that I'd probably give from a housing perspective. If you can become an owner, do it. And you can become an owner.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
Worst advice, though. We have to hear the worst advice.
The worst advice?
Worst housing advice.
Oh. Buy
There's too
now.
much to
No, I'm
choose.
just kidding.
Too much to choose from, right?
No, worst housing advice I would say is you have to move in order to live in the neighborhood of your dreams.
Okay. And then the final question is tin caps or comets?
Oh, tin caps. I mean, Comets is I love Comets,
Yeah.
but I have to have a few drinks to watch some of the fights. I'm sorry.
That's the way we feel about working at NEI. We have to have a few drinks just to watch. No.
Exactly.
I don't have to have any drinks to fight Bryce.
Wow.
I should probably take note to Bryce being one of the people behind the cameras in the room here is now going to beat up Jake after the show.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Well, listen, is any parting thoughts, anything else that you'd like to talk about with 720, anything to plant the seed? Because I think you've given us great advice and great content. I think housing is so important, and right now, especially while the costs are so high and everything else, I think getting people involved into that ecosystem and know that there's resources out there to help them is the biggest thing that we could have accomplished on this version of this show, because people do not know where to go. They'll go to their bank and they'll get cookie cutter information, and I think Club 720 is just a very, very valuable resource. I'm very excited for you, and I was so excited that we got you booked for the show. You're just Heather. I can't say enough about you. You're just a wonderful person, and you come through the camera great, I'm sure. So everybody else is going to be singing your praises.
I do want to just put one more thing at the end, because I'm not sure if we actually ever said it. Where can people access Club 720?
Thank you.
Yes, very, very explicitly, please.
It's in the App Store or Google Play or at www.club720.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hey, can I just say that there's going to be a big announcement at that housing symposium coming up on September 11th that's going to tie to all of this, so stay tuned.
Look at your enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Bursting over there. That's awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough. Thanks again for joining us, Heather. On behalf of NEI, I'm Jonathan Sackett, head of MarCom with...
Jacob Ihrie, Director of Regional Initiatives.
He says it way better than I do. You can find the NEI Pioneer Podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcast or pioneerstartshere.com. Heather, thank you so much.
And I'll see you next week at the Housing Symposium.
Yay. Thanks again, Heather.
Thank you.